Today is May 1st. Happy May Day. Happy Beltane. I'm French, and today I'm going to be bringing you on a wild crafting walk to make botanical ink. Let's go. First stop is we're gathering marigolds from my garden. One of my favorite natural dyes, but also a great addition to our botanical ink. Remember to check both ways as you cross roads. You might be really excited to go and get to the plants, but you need to make sure that you're safe. I'm careful to wildcraft plants that are in either alleyways or along roadsides that are forgotten. This is some dock that was growing a few blocks from my house. Being careful to take only a little bit from each stalk if you're going to be gathering. And this is considered a weed, so I find it okay to gather this one. Next stop is gathering some acorns. These are some oak trees that I gather leaves from in the fall once they've fallen off the trees, and I use them for eco-printing. But here I'm gathering up the acorn tops and the acorn bottoms, being careful not to take all of them because they are still food for squirrels, but just taking a few handfuls. A welcome addition to any ink. Next up is Dandelion Heads. Being careful to only take a few from the area. They are food for pollinators, and we must leave food for our bee friends. And spread the seeds so that there's going to be more later in the season. And these are just cherry blossoms. Nice to be rained on. A grapevine. We're not wildcrafting from it today, but just saying hi to some of my plant friends. And so now I'm gathering rusty bits of what most people would consider garbage, but rusty nails and washers and the like, because those I add into my botanical ink to darken the color. In natural dye language, it's called to sadden your color, is putting the addition of iron, but that's a really strange way of saying it. I just like that it darkens the color. So now here beside the railroad tracks, just gathering up some rusty bits. I try to have a good few handfuls of rusty metal to darken the ink. Here's some old chain and a seed pod. We'll see if that helps the ink at all. Next up, these are fallen from walnut trees. They are the pollen strands, and those are really great. I love walnut trees because they provide food and dyes, and they're just really big, beautiful, shady guys. So now we have a dye pot with a few cups of water, and I'm adding in my rusty bits. Now, this dye pot is no longer food safe. Anytime that you're using anything for making natural dyes or making ink, all of the objects that you're using are no longer food safe. And actually, this is going to be cooked outdoors, so I do have a portable stovetop. Here I am breaking up the marigolds. You don't have to break up your plant materials, but it does help expedite the process of cooking. So again, I'm doing this outside. If you're doing it indoors, you can do it in a very well ventilated place, but be mindful of what you're doing. Also note that I am handling all of the rusty bits with my bare hands. I do have an up-to-date tetanus shot. That is very important if you're working with rusty metals, but also probably just important in general. And those are some rocks that I gathered on our walk that I'll see later if I can grind them up and make some watercolor paint with them. There we go. The last bits into the pot, shake them into the water, put the lid on, and now add heat. And let it cook for about an hour to an hour and a half. There's my bird friend. Hello, little chickadee. So remember, hot things are hot. So when you're removing the lid from your pot, it is hot. And just testing to see what color that water, or we'll call it that juice, is now. And it's quite dark. The rust has definitely darkened our ink, which is awesome. So now I've put on my gloves because I do want to make sure that I don't get too much of that rust water on my hands, but also the pot is really, really hot. So I've turned off the heat source, and I've actually set the heat source aside so that it's not in my way. And we're going to take a mason jar, which is no longer food safe, and a strainer, which is also no longer food safe. And we're going to strain the plant matter off of that juice, off of that ink that we've just made. It's a beautiful dark brown color. But we won't actually know the true color until we try it out on paper. So we let it cool until it's no longer steaming, because the next things that we're adding, we want to do this while it's not boiling hot. So the liquid that I'm going to be adding is gum arabic. You can find fluid gum arabic from any of your local art supply stores. I actually make my own, which is a mixture of gum arabic, honey, glycerin, vegetable glycerin, clove oil, and water. But honestly, you can just get liquid gum arabic from your art supply store. So I'm going to add in about a tablespoon to this medium-sized jar of ink. And that just helps the ink move and be a little bit more fluid and allow the pigment in the ink to be suspended throughout the ink. And I'm adding about 10 drops of clove oil, and that's going to keep your ink from rotting. If you're just going to be using all of the ink all in the first day, that's great. You don't have to add the clove oil to help preserve it. But I'm not sure that anyone would go through that much ink in a day. So you do want to preserve it. Some people would put in, rather than the clove bud oil, they would put in rubbing alcohol. I do both, depending on the look of the ink that I want to have. So that first color strip, that just kind of gathers any of the super excess of the clove oil off the top of the ink, but it also helps me see what color I'm going to be getting. And so for my test swatch, my way of seeing what color this Beltane ink is going to be, I just make really simple marks, and I can take a look at the way that the ink is going to be reacting later on when I'm painting with it. So now after it's dried, I can see it's a lovely green-brown color. And there it is, the botanical ink from a walk on May Day. Thank you so much for coming along.